Welcome to the Queensland Globe webinar. This is a webinar that has been developed by the P2D project, which is focused on supporting you to gain a better understanding of your farm to maximise efficiency and profitability through precision ag data layers such as EM mapping, satellite imagery, georeference soil samples and yield maps. The Precision to Decision project is funded by the partnership between the Australian Government's Reef Trust and the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, along with Farmacist. Today we're going to be going through some basic Queensland Globe functions. So this includes how to use the program, finding cadastral boundaries, soil maps, historical sample sites, contours, groundwater bores and reports, along with monitoring bores and depth reports, as well as a few other different layers. So the first thing that we want to do is bring up Queensland Globe in our web browser. So to do that, we just go to Google and search Queensland Globe. And this is the correct one to click on here. Once you click on that, it's going to bring up this screen, which basically just is getting you to accept to their terms and conditions. So tick the box and click Get Started. And this should take you to your zoomed out view of Queensland. Once it's loaded, you can then zoom in a few different ways. So you can use the scroll button on your mouse to zoom in and zoom out by scrolling each way. Down the bottom right-hand corner, we've got the plus to zoom in, which if you click, it will zoom in, and the minus to zoom out. And then we can also use the search button over on the left-hand panel, and we can search by street address, lot plan, cities and towns, features of Queensland, or latitude and longitude. I'm going to search by cities and towns, and I'm just going to type in air and click search, and air pops up. So once I click on that, it will then automatically take me to the city centre of Ayr. From there, I can zoom out using my scroll panel, and I'm going to try and find the Farmacist farm, which we're going to look at today, which is just here. So by clicking and dragging on the map, I can move the map around. So that's clicking with the left-hand button on the mouse and then dragging. And then I'm going to zoom in on the Farmacist farm, which is this farm here. Once you've found the farm location, it's good to familiarise yourself with the Queensland Globe layout. On the right-hand panel, we've got the legend. This will basically change once we select different layers to view, and it can be hidden away by clicking on this arrow here on the right-hand side. We've also got this blue spanner up in the top right, which is the settings bar, and when you click that, that provides you access to the identify, measure, coordinate, drawing, and elevation tools. The most commonly used would be the identify. By clicking that, we can then click on different layers and that will bring up more information. Over on the right-hand panel, we've got, this is how you access different layers. So we've got the layers panel, and this provides you with different imagery that you can click on and click off, basically by just clicking on this little eye here. So the eyes that are blue are being used. So if we click that off, that turns the imagery off. You can get more information about the imagery by clicking the arrow there, and if we turn it back on, we can drag this little toolbar and make it more transparent. We can also edit different layers by clicking this button, and that allows us to remove them. So if we don't want to see them anymore, we can click on this little minus button here, which will remove them. And we click done. And then we can also add more layers. So this is where the really cool features of Queensland Globe come into effect. So we've basically got a whole different range of layers. And if we click on the arrows on any of these, it's going to bring up a lot more layers that we can turn on and off. Now, a really good tip for this is instead of turning the whole category on, which is loading quite a lot of data, it's really good to expand out what we're looking for. So if we go to boundaries, and then we go to say postcode, and just turn that one on by itself rather than turning everything on at the same time. It's a lot less things to load. So we can see the postcodes popped up there, which is quite handy. And same for turning off. It makes it so much quicker if you're just doing one layer at a time. So the first layer that we're going to look at is the elevation layers. So instead of just ticking that on, we're going to expand it. And then we're going to tick on the contour LiDAR 1 meter. If you click the info button here, it basically just gives a little bit more detail into how the layer was collected. And it also comes with the disclaimer that it shouldn't be used basically for land levelling or anything like that. You still need to go and collect elevation data within the paddock, but it's just to give you an idea of the natural landscape. If you click on this button here, that's going to turn on the elevation data, and you can see the contours pop up on the map. One little caveat with the LiDAR data is that you need to be zoomed in close enough to be able to see it. If I zoom out, you can see that it gets turned off. So you have to make sure you're nice and close. If we turn that one off and we just turn contours on, that gives a similar result. And with this one, you have to make sure, I think, that you're zoomed close enough as well to be able to view it. And turn that one back off. So the next lot of layers that we're going to turn on is the geoscientific information. So if we click expand on that, it brings up 4 different options. And if we click expand on the soils option, and then again on the soil mapping sites, I'm going to turn on soil sites. This brings up all the soil samples that we use to create the soil maps for the Burdekin district. So there's 2 different soil maps. There's one in the Briar and there's one in the Delta. If we go over to our toolbars panel and click on the spanner, and then click again on the eye within the little bubble, that's the identify tool. And then we can come down to one of these soil tests and click on it. And you can see that that brings up one result under the soil site. So if we click on that and click on this again, it brings up a little bit of information about that soil type. So it's a Candace soil black. When it was first observed, so 1983, the latitude, the longitude, and the soil name, which is a Katora. It's also got a link to the soil report. So if we click on this, it then loads a PDF report from when the soil test was taken. We click open. And depending on the soil and who it was collected by and what project it was collected under, but some of these details may or may not be collected and recorded. And then we've also got a soil profile morphology. So we've got the upper and the lower depth of the horizons, the colour, and some textures and a few other details that are recorded as well. Occasionally you'll have the pH, and sometimes you will have some pictures and salt readings and just different informations like that. So it can be quite useful to have. We close this. So one thing to note, and we'll talk about this more with the soil maps, but you can quite clearly see the division between the Delta and the Briar. So over here, the soil samples are more spaced out because they weren't collected on such a finer scale as the Briar. Noting that the Queensland Government Research Site, DAF, is collected a lot closer together just because it is a research site. But all the samples out in Jarvis Field and Rita Island are collected quite far apart. So if I close this and just drag us back out to the Clare region, you can see that the samples were collected much, much closer together with multiple samples per block. And that's why they've got such fine scale mapping available out there. So if we then click back on the attributes, back on the features, that brings us back to this layers panel. To get back to our main layers panel, we have to click on the left-hand side here. And then that will bring us back over here. Once again, it is handy if if you don't need this, this layer anymore, just to turn it off, because it does get a bit overwhelming for the program to try and load so many layers at once. So if we turn this one back off, even that can sometimes take some time. So once the soil mapping sites is turned off, we're then going to go down to the soil mapping. So if we expand that out, what we can see is a few different soil maps that have different scaled options. What you'll notice, so if we turn on this 1 to 10,000 scale map, the only area in the Burdekin that has that is the DPI. So if we zoom in, you can see that it's quite a fine scale map, and it's brought up lots of different soil types within a small area. We turn that back off again, and then turn on the 1 is to 25,000 scale, and zoom out. You can see that out in the Briar, we've got a 1 is to 25,000 within this area. So you can see the boundary of where that was mapped. And if we zoom in, we can see the soil map. So the layers that it's got here, we've got a 2UGE during this section here. If we go back over to our toolbar on the right-hand side and click Identify, we can click on that layer and it will bring up some information. Which basically just gives like a slight description of the 2UGE. Basically that it's a cracking clay soil, and if we click on the link, it brings up a land suitability information report. So these are all the things that it is suitable for, which you can then generate a PDF and print. So if we click back again, and then go back to the main layers panel. So if we then turn off the 1 is to 25,000 and we turn on 1 is to 50,000, and then zoom back out, we can then see that the Delta region and the Home Hill region have all been mapped. That's the boundary of that mapping. So if we zoom back in, and go back to the Farmacist farm, we can see that there's one soil type here that covers this portion, and then there's a small area that's got a slightly different soil type there. So we've got a BUMB through here and a BDBA. And once again, if I use my info tool to click on these regions and then click in the layers panel, I can then bring up more information, and then I can also click on the suitability link to bring up this information. So being able to view your farm with these soil layers on can be really handy to generate management zones when you're trying to work out an NMP budget for the year. It's also really helpful to pick soil test locations. So if this was our plant paddock here, we can see that this is the majority of the paddock for the soil sample location. So I would personally get a soil test within here, or potentially look at getting 2 soil tests on either side. One thing to remember though is that it is not quite as fine scale as in the Briar. So there can be instances where these soil maps aren't the most accurate that they can be. If we click back and we go back to our layers panel and then turn off the soils layer, we can then go back and have a look at the next layer. If we expand the inland waters section and then scroll down to the groundwater and expand it out, we can then turn on the registered water bores. which brings up all the water bores that are present within the vertican that are registered. Once again, if we go over to this panel and we get our info tool, we can zoom in and click on one of the water bores, and then click on the left-hand panel, and there's two different options there for the two different bores. I'm going to click on this one, 122. It basically brings up a little bit of information about it, when it was drilled, the latitude and the longitude, and it also brings up a bore report link. If we click on that link, it then brings up this bore report. If I click open file, it just brings up a little bit of extra information about who drilled the bore, how deep it went, what was used in the casing for the bore, and occasionally it also brings up some water analysis, so the pH, the EC, and just any kind of information that they collected during the process, which can be really helpful if you're trying to find out more info. So if we close this tab and then head back into Queensland Globe, click back to go back to our attributes and our features, and then click back on the layers panel. We're then going to turn off the registered water bores and look down here in the groundwater monitoring section where we've got the current water level monitoring bores. So if we turn those ones on, we can see they pop up in a yellow color. And if we zoom in, and once again getting our info tool from the panel up here, you can click on this bore and then click over on the left hand panel here, and again, and then that brings up similar information. It also brings up a water level plot and water level data. So if I click on this link, it opens up a depth below current natural surface chart. So we can see the fluctuations throughout each year as it's taken. If we close this one, and then if we go back over to our layers panel and we turn off the current water level monitoring bores, and then if we go down, we can click on the water monitoring bores with near real-time data. And turn that one on. There's quite a number of less of these compared to the other ones. You can just see the little green dots that are around in key locations. So if we zoom into this one here, and again, we've got our info tool, clicking on that, and we click on the link. It's going to open up a water monitoring information portal, which is giving us near real-time information of the depth. We've got a few photos of where the bore is located. And if we click on this, we've got a graph that we can look at also to see the fluctuations in the levels. So if we close that and go back to our layers panel and then turn that one back off, and then if we go down to the water management information, we've then got the watercourse identification map. So if we tick that one on, this is just going to bring up a map that shows all the watercourses that are found in your area. Now this is really important for spray buffers when you're spraying chemical on your paddock, just to make sure you're not going too close to a watercourse with certain chemicals and set wind directions. So a really handy tool to be able to turn on there as well. So if we turn the watercourse map off, the last thing that we're going to go through is just under the planning cadastre. So if we expand that and scroll down, we can turn on the land parcels. This just gives basically an overview of all the land parcels. So if we get our information tool, and if we scroll back into the Farmacist farm, over here, we can click on the information. So that just shows the railway easement there. We click back. And that just gives a little bit of information about the lot numbers and the areas. So another just handy tool to have. Go back to our layers and turn that one off. So throughout this webinar, we've only touched on a really, really small portion of the number of layers that are available in Queensland Globe. When you start expanding all of these out, it really just goes to show how much data there actually is spatially kept for Queensland. And all of it is freely available to use. So we've shown some of the ones that are going to be most helpful for a farming enterprise, but there will definitely be other ones that you might find within here that are going to help you. Thanks again for tuning in to this Queensland Globe webinar. If you've got any further questions, please feel free to reach out to your Farmacist agronomist and they will be able to help you out.